I found the riot control vehicle on the second day of the collapse, parked behind a chain-link fence at a training lot that used to belong to the city. I knew the place because I had done contract work there years ago. Basic security systems and gate wiring, nothing heroic. The lot sat behind an industrial strip where nobody went unless he had a reason. That was the point. Training days, paint rounds, smoke drills, then everybody went home and the vehicle stayed put, decommissioned on paper, still heavy and real in the sun. The first day had already proven the rule. Anything that looked official pulled people in fast, for help, for answers, for anger. I spent day one inside my apartment with the television shouting and then going silent, the cell network turning into a spinning wheel, and the street noise turning into a steady churn. I did not sit and pray for it to pass. I stuffed a backpack, filled every bottle I owned, and watched out the window until I had a clean moment to move. When I finally went down the stairwell, I went quiet, one floor at a time, listening for voices and feet. Outside, the neighborhood had already changed shape. Cars sat at odd angles, doors open. A man dragged a suitcase through the intersection while he kept checking behind him. A woman stood on her porch holding her phone out at shoulder height, recording, talking into it, as if the phone could call reality back into place. Farther down, someone had started a fire in a trash can, and the smoke made everything smell sharp and bitter. I moved in the shadow of parked cars, not crouching, not doing anything dramatic, just keeping my head down and my pace steady so nobody could claim I was running from him. I saw the first infected close enough to know the stories were true and also wrong in a way that mattered. The body still worked. The body still had weight and speed. A man in a torn polo shirt stumbled into the road and grabbed at a mailbox post with both hands, not to steady himself, but to keep from falling while he stared at a woman across the street. He did not shout anything. He did not beg. His mouth opened and closed without words, and then he moved, quick, straight, ignoring the cars. The woman turned and ran, tripped on the curb, and he was on her before I had a plan. I did not watch longer than a second. I backed away and chose another block. By mid-morning, the city was already full of little traps. A crowd around a storefront, a line of cars stuck behind a minor fender bender that nobody could solve because nobody could agree who was in charge, a siren that started and then cut off suddenly, leaving the street to fill the silence with shouting. I kept moving because staying meant being noticed, and being noticed meant being recruited or blamed. I aimed for the riverfront warehouse district because it had space, and space meant angles and exits. I had one advantage. Not a weapon, not a bunker, not some hidden stash. I had keys. I still had my old ring from contract jobs, a dozen mismatched keys that opened city utility cabinets, service doors, T-handle boxes, padlocks that had not been changed since the last budget year. Most of them would fail me that day, but one might not. That was my whole plan, and it felt thin, but thin plans still beat sitting on a couch waiting for the world to choose for you. I reached the training lot late afternoon. The front gate was shut, the chain looped and padlocked, but the fence line had a service cutout on the far side where maintenance trucks used to enter. I found it by memory, then confirmed it by the familiar rust stains on the posts. Somebody had already tried to get in. Bolt cutters had bitten the chain and failed. That told me two things. People knew this place had value, and people had not yet taken everything. I did not smile. I checked the street behind me twice, then crossed fast and low and went to work. The lock was cheap. The chain was cheap. The cutout gate swung inward with a tired groan, and the sound traveled farther than I wanted. I froze, counted to 10 in my head, listened. No footsteps rushing, no voices. I went in and pulled it shut again, not bothering to lock it. Locks were polite requests at this point. I moved between parked training barricades and stacks of worn cones toward the far pad where the riot vehicle sat. It looked wrong sitting there with nobody around it. The paint was faded, but the windows were thick. The tires were heavy. The body was tall enough to see over cars. The front had a broad push bar and the kind of reinforced bumper that made regular pickups look delicate. The side doors had handles protected by metal guards, built to keep hands from grabbing and pulling. I could already picture myself inside it, safe, and I could also picture everyone else seeing the same thing. The driver door was locked. I tried my ring. 2 keys failed. The third clicked. The door opened with a stiff hinge and a faint smell of old rubber, stale sweat, and dust baked by summers. Inside, it was not comfortable. It was a working space, built for long shifts and hard use, not for sleep. There were metal surfaces everywhere, with scuffs and scratches from boots. The seat cushion was thin. The dashboard was simple and tough. The ignition key was not in it. I did not expect it to be. I leaned down and opened the small panel under the steering column, the one I remembered because I had once helped a city mechanic run a diagnostic cable through it. I did not hotwire it in a movie way. I did not twist random wires and hope. I checked the fuse block. I checked the battery switch. Then I climbed back out and searched the yard office, the little concrete building with 2 windows and a dead flagpole. Inside the office, the air was hot and stale. A calendar on the wall still showed last year's training schedule. A coffee mug sat in the sink with old grounds dried to stone. I found a key locker, the kind with small hooks and printed tags. Most hooks were empty. One hook had a tag that said Unit 3. I took that key and I did not waste time wondering whether it was fate. I went back out, kept my head on a swivel, and got into the driver's seat again. The key turned. The dash lights came alive. I held the brake, turned further, and the engine rolled over with a deep, slow sound that felt too loud in the open yard. It caught, settled into a rough idle, then smoothed out. I waited, listening for knocks, for belts squealing, for anything that sounded expensive. The temperature gauge rose slowly. Oil pressure held. I let it run, and I used the time to strip it of anything that screamed police. The first thing I did was pull the siren fuse. Not because I planned to hit the siren, but because accidents happen when panic grabs your hands. I covered the spotlight lens with tape. I unscrewed the external speaker cover and stuffed rags inside it until it would muffle any accidental broadcast. I found a small rack of helmets and face shields in the rear, and I tossed them out onto the yard floor. I wanted space, not riot gear. The irony was not funny. Fuel was the next problem. The tank was not full. The needle sat under 3/4. That might sound generous to someone used to compact cars, but this vehicle drank fuel. I had watched it on training days, idling for hours, then doing short bursts, and the gauge still fell. I found a diesel storage tank behind the office, the kind used for generators. I grabbed a hand pump, a hose, and I started filling every container I could find. I loaded the containers into the rear and strapped them down with old cargo straps from the supply closet. Night was coming. I did not want to drive through the city in this thing during darkness on my first run. Visibility would be worse for me and better for everyone else watching for silhouettes. I stayed inside the yard, parked the vehicle behind the office building to cut line of sight, and I set up my first night in a steel box. I cracked a roof vent, then another, testing airflow. Inside, the air warmed fast. Condensation built on the inside of the glass. I wiped it with my sleeve and promised myself I would solve ventilation before it solved me. I did not sleep well. I did not lay down and drift off. I sat upright with my shoes on, listening to the city rumble in the distance. Twice I heard movement outside the fence, and I kept my hands away from the horn and the lights. I watched through the windshield without turning my head too much, careful with reflections. A pair of men walked past the gate at some point, talking loud, carrying bags. One man banged on the fence once, testing, then kept going. I did not move. At first light, I moved. I rolled the vehicle forward and eased it out of the cutout gate. The engine note carried. The tires made a low, heavy crunch over gravel. I checked both directions, then pulled onto the service road. Driving it felt different than driving anything civilian. The steering was heavy. The hood line was high. Every mirror showed a lot of steel behind me. I kept speed low, not because I feared a ticket, but because a breakdown in the wrong spot would be a slow death. 2 blocks into the warehouse district, I learned the first lesson about visibility. A man stepped out from behind a delivery van and waved both arms hard, trying to flag me down. He had a backpack and a cut on his forehead. He looked straight at the cab and shouted, but the glass kept most of it out. Behind him, a woman jogged into view, then another man. Their faces all had the same desperate question. I did not stop. I did not wave. I kept rolling, eyes forward, hands steady. In my mirror, I saw the man run after me for a few steps, then stop, then shout again at the rear of the vehicle. A few minutes later, I saw why he had wanted me. Half a block behind him, 3 infected were moving through the alley, turning their heads toward noise and movement. The man had not been waving for a ride. He had been waving for a rescue. If I stopped, I would become the loudest thing on that street, the biggest target. I would also become a magnet for any other survivors watching from windows. I kept going, and I hated myself for how easy it was to keep going. I chose a grocery store near the edge of the district because it had a loading bay and a concrete apron that let me back in without blocking the street. The front was chaos. Broken glass, carts scattered, a few bodies on the ground that I refused to inspect. I drove past and went straight to the service side. The rear door was shut, the metal roll-up half bent. I used the push bar gently, not ramming, just leaning the vehicle's weight into it until the door gave enough to squeeze through. Inside, the store smelled of spilled milk and warm plastic. The power was out. Emergency lights were dead. I moved fast with a headlamp, grabbing what mattered. Water first, canned food second. Peanut butter, crackers, powdered drink mix, whatever had calories and could survive heat. I avoided the pharmacy aisle because it drew people, and because I did not have time to play doctor. I grabbed trash bags, duct tape, a small toolkit, and a couple of cheap sleeping pads from the camping section. The whole time I kept listening. Metal creaks, distant thumps, a faint scrape that might have been a person, might have been a pallet shifting. I did not call out. I did not announce myself. I loaded everything onto a cart, rolled it to the loading bay, and stacked it in the rear of the riot vehicle. Then I shut the rear doors and locked them from inside. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, engine off, and I listened again. I heard voices outside. 2 men, close enough to the loading bay. One man sounded excited, talking fast. The other man sounded cautious, asking questions. I did not hear their words clearly, but I heard the tone. The excited man had found something valuable. I stayed still. The men reached the loading bay door. The metal rattled when one man pulled on it. Then a fist hit it, then another. Not frantic, not begging, testing. I started the engine without touching the horn or lights. The idle filled the bay. The men outside went quiet for a beat. Then the cautious man said something that sounded like a warning. The excited man hit the door again, harder, then pulled away. I put the vehicle in reverse and backed out slowly, watching mirrors. The loading bay door shuddered once more, then stopped. I got out of there. That was the pattern for the next hours. I would find something, take it. Then someone would notice the vehicle. Sometimes it was survivors. Sometimes it was infected, drawn by sound. Sometimes it was both. The vehicle kept me safe from the infected, mostly, but it did not keep me safe from people who wanted what it represented. I drove with my windows up, vents cracked, eyes scanning rooftops and intersections. In the afternoon, I crossed a boulevard lined with shuttered shops, and I saw a roadblock built by strangers. 2 cars had been pushed nose to nose across the lane, and a third sat sideways behind them. A man stood near the gap with a long gun held at low ready. He wore a work jacket and a bright safety vest, and he had a bandana tied around his face. He saw the riot vehicle, and his posture changed. His head lifted, shoulders squared. He waved me down with one hand and pointed at the gap. I did not stop. I also did not blast through. I slowed, looked for an exit, and found a narrow side street that might fit if I took it wide. The man raised the gun a little, not aiming, but making sure I saw it. Another man stepped out from behind the sideways car with a handgun. That was enough information. I turned onto the side street. The vehicle scraped the curb with a hard bump, and the whole body rocked. I kept going. Behind me, something cracked. A sharp sound, then another. The glass did not shatter, but I heard impacts on the rear body, dull thumps. The vehicle kept moving. I did not speed up into panic. I kept it controlled, because losing control would flip me into a parked car and end everything. I took 2 turns, then another, and the street opened onto an access road behind a closed factory. I did not stop until I had concrete between me and that roadblock. I parked under an overhang and inspected the damage. 2 fresh dents on the rear quarter, 1 on the doorframe. The paint was chipped and bright metal showed through. Nobody had made it inside. Still, the message was clear. People were willing to shoot at this thing just to see what happened. If someone decided to take it seriously, someone would bring tools, fire, or patience. I spent the next hour changing the outside. I found a bucket of old gray primer in the factory maintenance room. I found a roller, half-dried but usable. I painted over the obvious markings. I did not do a clean job. I did not need art. I needed the vehicle to stop reading as police at a glance. I smeared mud along the lower panels. I taped cardboard over the remaining reflective decals. It looked worse, which was the goal. By evening, I had enough supplies for a few days, and I had a new plan: leave the city before everyone organized into hunting packs. I pointed the vehicle toward the outer beltway, avoiding main routes. The beltway itself was clogged in places with abandoned cars. I used the push bar to nudge a couple of them enough to make a gap, careful not to wedge myself. I kept checking the temperature gauge because the engine fan sounded strained in the slow crawl. Near a collapsed on-ramp, I saw a group of people standing beside a box truck. The truck was parked crooked, front wheels on the shoulder. One man was under the hood. A woman stood with her arms crossed, scanning the road. A teenage boy sat on the curb holding a metal pipe across his knees. When they saw the riot vehicle, all 3 turned as one. The woman stepped into the lane and lifted one hand, palm out, then pointed toward the shoulder, asking me to stop without saying it. I slowed and rolled past, then stopped 20 yards beyond them. I did not stop beside them. I did not want someone stepping onto my running board. I opened my driver window a few inches, just enough to speak. The woman approached alone, hands visible. She had grease on her forearms and her hair was pulled back tight. She kept her eyes on my face, not on the inside of the cab, which told me she was disciplined. She spoke in a steady voice. "He needs a part for the truck. We have food and water. We need a ride out of the choke points. That vehicle can push through. We can pay." I kept my voice calm. "I do not want trouble. What part?" She pointed back. "Radiator hose split near the clamp. We can patch, but we need a proper clamp and hose if we find one. He can keep it running, but the stop and go kills it." That was a real problem, not a scam story about a baby and medicine. I weighed it fast. If I let them close, I might get pulled into a mess. If I refused, I stayed alone, which sounded clean until I imagined a breakdown on an empty road with no second set of hands. I nodded once. One person comes close at a time. Nobody behind my doors. If you try anything, I leave. If an infected shows up, you move with me or you get left. She nodded back without drama. "Fair. My name is Marla. He is Ben. The kid is Cody." She raised her voice just enough to carry. "Ben, bring the tool bag. Cody, stay back." Ben approached slowly with a canvas bag. He looked exhausted. He did not look hungry for a fight. I popped the rear door from inside and stepped back into the cargo area to give him space without giving him access to the cab. Marla stayed near the driver's side, watching the road. Ben opened the bag and showed me clamps and hose pieces, then asked quietly, "You got anything bigger? Anything heavy-duty?" I had grabbed a maintenance kit from the city lot, and inside it I had a few industrial clamps and spare hose segments. I handed him what I had and watched his hands. He did not pocket anything. He checked sizes, nodded, and said, "This helps." He looked up at me and added, "People are setting traps on the beltway. You did right not stopping beside us." Marla came around and spoke again. "We can keep our truck running for a while. The problem is choke points and roadblocks. Your vehicle gets attention, but it also gets through." I answered honestly, "It gets attention from everyone. That is the worst part." She held my gaze. "Then use it smart. Stay moving. Park hidden. Keep fuel. If you stop where people can gather, you are done." She glanced at the cab and then back at me. "Let us ride with you until we clear the city. After that, we split if you want." I agreed, but with rules that made me sound cold. 1 bag each, no arguing inside the cab. Cody rides in back with the door locked, with water and a headlamp so he could stay out of my blind spots and out of my line of fire if something went wrong. Ben rides passenger to help spot road hazards. Marla navigates with a paper map she pulled from her glove box. Nobody touches the radio scanner I had found in the riot vehicle. Nobody touches the driver controls except me. We moved at dusk, which was a risk, but the beltway at full daylight had too many eyes. The riot vehicle led, the box truck followed. Ben called out hazards in a low voice. "Car door open on right, debris in lane. That ramp is blocked." Marla kept checking mirrors, keeping the truck tucked in so it did not lag and get swallowed by the dark. Cody stayed in back and did not complain, which made me trust him a fraction. At one interchange, we found the first real trap. A line of cars sat abandoned in the right lane, spaced in a way that looked staged. Between them, nails glittered on the pavement under my headlights. Ben spotted it first and muttered, "Tire kill." I slowed, shifted left, and rolled onto the shoulder where the grass met broken asphalt. The riot vehicle could handle that. The box truck could not. Marla leaned forward, voice tight but controlled. "If Ben drives the truck through the middle, he loses tires. If he stops, someone comes out." I took a breath, forced my hands to stay steady. and did the only thing that made sense. I drove the riot vehicle forward, past the staged cars, then turned it across the lane at an angle, blocking sight from anyone hiding behind the line. I hit the floodlight switch for half a second, sweeping the darkness beyond the cars, then shut it off again. In that brief flash, I saw two men crouched behind a sedan, one holding a long gun, one holding something that looked like a gas can. They stood up fast when the light hit them, shocked that their cover had been revealed. I did not open my window. I did not shout threats. I put the riot vehicle in drive and rolled forward, push bar kissing the rear of the sedan. I did not smash it. I shoved it. Metal squealed. The sedan shifted enough to open a narrow lane between it and the car ahead. I kept pushing until the lane was wide enough for the box truck to slip through. Ben drove the truck forward, slow, careful, tires avoiding the nails. The crouched men started shouting, but their voices sounded small under the engine noise. One man lifted the gas can, probably planning to throw it. I turned the wheel slightly and put the riot vehicle between him and the truck. He hesitated. That hesitation saved us. Marla leaned toward the windshield and said, "Do not stop. Keep it rolling." We cleared the trap without a firefight, without a crash, without a dramatic last second. Just heavy steel doing what heavy steel does. A few minutes later, I turned off the beltway onto a frontage road and kept going until the city lights fell behind us and the road turned into scattered industrial buildings and dark fields. We stopped under a highway overpass for our first shared night. Not because it was romantic shelter, but because it had concrete pillars, multiple exits, and a clear line of sight down the road. I parked the riot vehicle nose out. The truck parked behind me, also nose out, so nobody would need to reverse in panic. Ben checked the truck's hose repair by flashlight. Marla checked my engine bay and frowned at the coolant reservoir. "You're losing a little," she said. "Not a lot yet, but enough that you should watch at every stop." I opened the rear and let Cody out to stretch while I stood near him, not hovering, just present. The kid's eyes kept flicking to the riot vehicle's windows and the thick doors. He finally asked, "Is it bulletproof?" I answered the truth. Some parts, not everything. Do not bet your life on glass. He nodded, absorbing it. People will chase you for it. People already tried, I said. That is why we do not park where people can gather. We ate cold food and kept talking short, practical. No speeches, no long debates about morality. The air under the overpass smelled of damp concrete and old exhaust. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then stopped suddenly. That silence made me look up and scan the dark again. I checked the mirrors, then checked them again, and I forced myself not to touch the horn. Before dawn, we moved again. We avoided towns. We avoided gas stations on main roads. We followed Marla's paper map along county routes that paralleled the highway, but stayed out of sight. In daylight, the riot vehicle drew fewer infected, because we kept the engine steady and avoided sharp starts. It still drew people. Twice we saw figures on porches watching us pass, faces blank, not waving, not shouting, just watching. That kind of watching felt worse than shouting. Near a small service station at a rural junction, we found a pump canopy still standing and a tanker truck parked behind it. That was fuel, but fuel with a price. 2 pickup trucks sat nearby, one with doors open. I slowed and did a slow loop, scanning. No movement, no voices. Then a man stepped out from behind the tanker, holding a rifle and a hand up, palm out. He wore a sheriff department jacket that looked real. His face was tight, eyes sharp. Another man appeared behind him, then a woman. All three watched the riot vehicle with the focus of people who had already decided what it meant. Marla muttered, "Law is gone, but uniforms still work on some people." Ben said, "Do not let them flank." I stopped at a distance that kept my front push bar pointed toward open road. I lowered my window 2 inches. The sheriff jacket man spoke first. "Turn off the engine and step out." His voice had authority in it, practiced from years of being obeyed. He kept the rifle low but ready. I did not step out. I did not turn off the engine. I replied with control. "I am not stopping here. I am passing through." He pointed at the riot vehicle. "That belongs to the county. That is public equipment." I said, "County offices are closed. I got it from a city training lot. Nobody was guarding it. Nobody was using it." He took a step closer. "Public gear belongs to the public. Hand it over. You can keep walking." That was not a negotiation. That was a demand dressed in civic language. Ben's hand hovered near the dashboard, not touching anything, but ready. Marla's eyes locked on the sheriff jacket man's shoulders and hands, reading tension. I kept my tone flat. "No." The sheriff jacket man's expression hardened. "Then you are stealing from your neighbors." I answered, "My neighbors are gone. I am not handing over my shelter to strangers with rifles." The man behind him shifted his stance. The woman glanced toward the box truck behind us, and her eyes widened in greedy calculation. I felt the situation tipping, not into a shootout, but into a standoff that would end with someone making a bad move. I did not wait for that. I turned the wheel slightly, checked my mirror, and rolled forward. Slow at first, then steady. The sheriff jacket man raised his rifle and aimed at my windshield. That was a clear line. I did not hit the gas hard. I did not charge him. I kept moving, forcing him to choose between firing and stepping aside. He stepped aside at the last moment, shouting something I did not catch. I kept going. Behind me, the box truck followed. No shots came. Maybe the man believed the glass would stop rounds and did not want to waste ammo. Maybe he did not want the noise. Either way, we escaped with our tires intact. We drove another hour before stopping. Marla had Ben pull the box truck into a stand of trees off a dirt service road. I parked the riot vehicle behind brush, using branches and a tarp to break its outline. We ate and we talked about what came next. Ben wanted a community. He wanted a place with people and a perimeter. Marla wanted a workshop and fuel storage. Cody wanted his aunt's house in a town 2 counties away. I wanted something simpler. I wanted to stay alive without becoming a rolling prize. I told them the thing I had been trying not to say out loud. This vehicle is protection, but it is also a signal flare. Every time someone sees it, someone thinks it solves his problem. Help, revenge, power, whatever. That does not stop. It gets worse. Marla nodded. Then we change what it looks like. She had an idea that sounded mundane, which meant it might work. We raided an abandoned road department yard that afternoon, the kind with salt piles, cones, and old signage. We found magnetic panels, faded logos, a stack of orange reflective triangles, and a roll of vinyl that said municipal water. We did not make it pretty. We covered the remaining police hints. We dirtied the body again. We even hung a couple of battered traffic signs on the side, not readable, just clutter to confuse the first glance. It did not make the vehicle invisible. Nothing that big becomes invisible, but it changed the story it told from a distance. A passerby might think it was a utility vehicle, a service truck, something boring. Boring was survival. Boring meant fewer people sprinting toward us with demands. The next 2 days were a grind. Drive, scout, siphon fuel, check coolant, check tires, move again. We found a rural fire station with a locked bay, and we used my old keys to get inside. We took a hose, a couple of extinguishers, and a small hand pump. We refilled the riot vehicle's water tank from a cistern behind the station, not filling it all the way, just enough to have options. If someone tried to set us on fire, water mattered. If the engine overheated, water mattered. If we needed to wash the windshield because mud dried into a blind smear, water mattered. On the 4th day, the attention found us again, even with the new disguise. We were crossing a 2-lane road near a strip of closed roadside businesses when a pickup truck came up fast behind us, then swung into the oncoming lane to pull alongside. The driver was a man with a shaved head and wraparound sunglasses. He leaned out the window and yelled something I could not hear over engine noise. His passenger held up a handgun and pointed it at the side window, not firing, just making sure we understood the leverage. Ben cursed under his breath, then caught himself when Cody shifted in the rear. Marla stared straight ahead and said, "Do not look at him. Do not react." The pickup paced us. The driver pointed forward, ordering me to turn off onto a side road where a closed storage facility sat behind a fence. That side road had no exits. That side road was a cage. I shook my head once, small, and kept going. The man in the passenger seat raised the handgun higher and tapped it against his window, smiling. I did not slam the brakes. I did not try to sideswipe him. I waited for the road to curve near a shallow ditch and a line of mailboxes. Then I eased the riot vehicle toward the edge of the lane, forcing the pickup to choose between backing off and riding the shoulder. The pickup stayed beside me and rode the shoulder. Gravel sprayed. The pickup's tires slipped, then caught, then slipped again. The driver overcorrected, and the pickup fishtailed. I kept my steering steady and kept rolling forward. The pickup recovered, fell back a car length, then surged again. The passenger leaned out farther and fired. The sound cracked across the open road, sharp and ugly. Something hit the riot vehicle with a dull punch. No glass shattered. Cody shouted from the rear, not a scream, but a raw reflex noise. I shouted back, "Stay down, hands off the door." Marla spoke fast, controlled. "Next curve, there is a farm access road. Turn hard. The truck follows. If the pickup follows, the ditch narrows and he has to slow." I did it. I turned onto the farm access road, tires thumping over broken pavement onto packed dirt. Dust rose behind us. The box truck followed, engine straining. The pickup followed too, but it lost speed because it had to avoid ruts and rocks. The passenger fired again, then again, the shots spaced by his panic and poor control. The riot vehicle took the hits and kept going. Ahead, the access road narrowed between a ditch on one side and a fence line on the other. I drove straight and steady. The pickup tried to close the gap, then the right wheels dropped into the ditch with a hard jolt. The truck bounced, scraped, and slowed. The driver fought the steering wheel, trying to climb out. I did not stop to watch. I drove until the farm access road met a tree line and a broken gate. I drove through the gate and into the trees, branches scraping the sides, the whole vehicle shuddering under the contact. The box truck followed, slower, but it made it. We did not keep driving deep into the woods. This thing was not a forest crawler. I found a clearing near an old equipment shed and parked nose out again, always nose out. Ben hopped out, checked the box truck, then checked the tree line for pursuit. Marla climbed onto the riot vehicle's side step and inspected the outer panel where the shot had hit. A fresh dent, a small crater in the paint. Nothing punched through. Her jaw tightened anyway. She looked at me and said the part that mattered. If those men had a rifle in time, this ends different. We cannot keep assuming dumb attackers. That night, we made a choice. Ben did not like it. Cody did not understand it. Marla and I both understood it too well. We split the convoy. The box truck would go on without the riot vehicle's shadow drawing hunters. The riot vehicle would move separate, meeting only when needed. It was not betrayal. It was tactics. One big moving prize attracts a crowd. Two smaller moving targets confuse a crowd. Ben argued, but he kept it short because he saw my face and realized I was done debating. "We are safer together," he said. I answered, "Together is also predictable. Predictable gets hunted." Marla put a hand on Ben's shoulder, firm. "He is right. We meet at the quarry road in 2 days. If one vehicle gets blocked, the other does not drive into the same trap." Cody finally spoke up from the rear steps, voice small but steady. "I do not want to be alone." I looked at him and chose my words carefully. "You are not alone. You are with Ben. Ben keeps you alive. I keep this vehicle from becoming your coffin." They left at first light. The box truck rolled down the dirt road and disappeared behind trees. I stayed parked for another 10 minutes, listening, scanning. Then I started the riot vehicle and went the opposite direction. Driving alone again felt wrong after sharing tasks, but it also felt cleaner. Fewer voices meant fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes meant fewer moments where someone grabbed the wrong handle or opened the wrong door at the wrong time. For the next day, I kept the riot vehicle out of sight whenever possible. I moved early, parked hidden by mid-afternoon, moved again near dusk if I had to. I avoided towns entirely. When I needed fuel, I targeted farm equipment sheds and small contractor yards, places where diesel might exist in drums or tanks, but where crowds did not gather. I filtered fuel through cloth, slow and annoying, because dirt in a tank would end me faster than any infected. Late on the second day after the split, I reached the quarry road meeting point. The quarry itself was abandoned, heavy machinery sitting still, the kind of place that looked valuable but also dangerous because it had wide-open sight lines. I did not drive into the center. I parked behind a pile of aggregate near the entrance, where my outline broke against the mounds. I climbed out, stretched my legs, and listened. Wind moved through scrub grass. A loose sign clinked against a post somewhere. No engines. No voices. An hour passed before the box truck arrived. It came slow, cautious, stopping twice to scan the road behind. Ben stepped out, face gray with fatigue and dust. Cody followed, eyes wide, scanning everything. Marla got out last, and the moment she saw my vehicle intact, her shoulders dropped a fraction. She walked up and spoke low. "We got tailed for 10 miles. We shook him near the creek crossing." Ben added, "Roadblock near the north route. Not infected. People, 2 trucks, barricades, spotters." He looked at my vehicle and then at me. "They want big vehicles. They want fuel. They want control." I nodded. That never stops. We used the quarry as a supply stop, not a home. We grabbed tools from a maintenance container. We siphoned diesel from a parked loader. We filled water from a rain collection basin, then treated it with what tablets we had. Marla helped me patch my coolant leak with a clamp and a fresh segment of hose from the quarry's storage. Ben checked my tires, found 2 nails embedded shallow, and pulled them before they worked deeper. Cody carried what he could without complaint, which mattered more than bravery. By the end of that day, I understood the riot vehicle for what it was. It was not a fortress. It was not a solution. It was a tool that bought seconds when seconds decided everything. It kept infected hands off me when I needed to move through a tight street. It kept bullets from ending me fast when a bad man got impatient. It also painted a target on my route that smarter and hungrier people could track. Every time I used it, I had to spend effort undoing the attention it created. That night, we made the final adjustment. We hid the riot vehicle. Not abandoned, not sacrificed, hidden. We found a drainage cut under an old rail spur that led into a thicket behind the quarry road, a place nobody would drive by accident. I eased the vehicle in, branches scraping, tires sinking a little into damp soil, and I stopped when the body sat fully under tree cover. We draped tarps and old netting over the roofline. We pushed brush up against the sides. From the road, it became a dark shape among other dark shapes. Ben looked uncertain. "You are giving up your advantage." I answered, "I am controlling when I use it. That is the advantage." Marla nodded. "We use the truck for normal travel. We keep this for emergencies, for supply runs into rough zones, for pushing through blockages. We stop advertising it every mile." Cody stood close to Marla and asked, "What if someone finds it?" I crouched near him so he could see my face clearly in the low light. "Then we do not rush in to save it. Vehicles can be replaced. People cannot. If someone finds it, that means the area is compromised. We leave." We left the quarry road in the box truck. Lighter, quieter, less obvious. The riot vehicles stayed hidden behind us, a steel reserve we could return to when the world forced our hand. Driving away felt strange, almost wrong, after all the work to get it, feed it, repaint it, defend it. Still, the road ahead was calmer without the constant swivel of every head toward our shape. People still watched, but fewer people sprinted toward us. Fewer people raised guns just to test a legend. On the last stretch of daylight, we passed a burnt-out intersection where a police cruiser sat sideways, doors open, empty, abandoned. Cody stared at it through the window. Ben stared too, jaw tight. Marla kept her eyes forward. I watched it disappear behind us, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not panic, something quieter. Authority was a costume now. Steel was still steel. The only real rule left was what you could protect and what you could walk away from. I had learned to walk away from my loudest protection so it would not become my loudest mistake.